Hello, everyone. Welcome to our fireside chat on real-time OSS BSS to embrace the telco edge opportunity. My name is John Abraham, and I'll be the moderator for this session today. I'm a principal analyst with Appledore Research Group. We are a telco media technology-focused research and consulting firm, and I lead a research practice that's focused on digital engagement. With me, I have two experts on the panel. First is Bruno Dzogovic, who is the Program Director for Cloud at Telenor. And the second is John Byrne, who's the Director of Strategy at Netcracker. I'll quickly turn it over to the gentlemen so that they can do a quick introduction before we get started. Let's start with you, Bruno. Over to you for a quick intro.
My name is Bruno Dzogovic. I'm the Program Director for Cloud Research and Innovation at Telenor R&I. So this is different than Telenor Norway, because we work with research and innovation. So that's something that needs to be cleared out in advance. So we work with different topics, and I'm the one who is responsible with just cloud operations and research and innovation in the cloud direction.
Great. And John?
Great. Hi, everyone. This is John Byrne. I am Market Strategy Director for Netcracker Technology. For those of you who don't know, Netcracker is a full-stack OSS BSS software and services firm with a 30-plus year history of delivering for CSPs globally. So my prior experience is as an analyst for 25 years, covering operators and vendors, and for the last 10 years, focusing squarely on OSS and BSS.
Great. Thank you. All right, let's get started. This is quite an interesting topic, but I thought it's just fair to begin by understanding what is your definition for telco edge. We've had a lot of different perceptions and opinions about what constitutes the telco edge. And maybe, Bruno, let's start with you. What is the telco edge in your perspective, given especially in your role? I know you guys have been looking very closely at this. So let's begin there with you, Bruno.
The telco edge, that's a very broad topic. And as you mentioned, it can be defined in many different ways. And one of the main directions that we think in terms of cloud is that telco edge provides cloud services in the form of disaggregated architectures that can be deployed close to the end user. So if we say that edge can be any kind of computational resource with constrained computational capabilities, it's something that can be utilized on the premises of the users and provide private cloud connectivity, or in our case in telcos, private 5G connectivity, etc. So the variety of use cases that you can deploy on the edge is countless.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. So, John, sorry, anything you want to add to that, or you think that's a comprehensive view there?
It is a tricky question because essentially you are talking about, depending on where you are, who you are as an operator, obviously there's thousands and thousands of central offices out there that could serve the purpose of that role that Bruno mentioned, of kind of providing a local source of edge computing with low latency and high accuracy. And the question is, where does that fit within the larger computing? Because you really go from smartphones, which are now increasingly able to do some of that processing, all the way to the core, where you obviously can do that, but the latency the payload requirements there are too taxing for many use cases. So you have to find that sweet spot. That's where I think a lot of the operators have struggled to say, okay, now what is it? Now what can we do with it?
Right. I think that's a good segue into our next question here, which is that edge is not a new theme. Like, for instance, Gen AI is. We have been talking about edge for a while now, and yet there is still a fair degree of optimism about the opportunities that we are yet to explore as an industry at the edge. And one of, Bruno and John, when we actually connected before the session, one of my takeaways from that conversation was that there is still a lot of optimism about what is yet to be seen or monetized, let's put it that way, at the edge. Can you talk a bit about that? Bruno, let's start with you from your perspective and Telenor's perspective about the opportunity and why you think this might be the inflection point for the telco edge.
Well, I can start with the fact that when we talk about deploying edge, we first think in terms of partnerships with the edge providers and hyperscalers who may provide edge services. But at the same time, many companies, including telco operators, want to have their own private on-premise deployment. And then you have the option of open source edge deployment. So when we talk about the maximal return of investment, so combining these two and forming a type of a hybrid cloud architecture is the sweet spot that everybody would like to have. So in reality, this is something that is not easy to balance. Why? First of all, as you said, the return of investment, when we talk about public services, it can boil down to services which might not be in fact necessary for the company and the operator, particularly the telco, and these are provided, like, let's say, for an extra fee by the hyperscalers. And the other way around, if we talk about private edge deployments, then you need the capacity to manage all these edge devices. So as you scale further down the road, you need the competence and capacity to be able to manage such a larger edge ecosystem, especially when it's geographically dispersed, as we have in the case in Norway. So if you don't apply some kind of cloud native principles of management and automation and some degree of autonomy in the provisioning, at least stage, it becomes costly and cumbersome to manage a lot of different edge devices at different edge regions, especially in the north of Norway, where we have more extreme conditions and we have edge sites running, for example.
Right. Now, that's a good point. The importance of automation there to actually make this economically viable. John, let me bring you in here. What are your thoughts about the opportunity at the edge and where do you agree to that theme that we are indeed at an inflection point, or you think that's still some distance away?
Yeah, I do feel like we're at a bit of an inflection point for a couple of reasons. There is there's this notion that operators have lost out on 5G and 5G hasn't delivered, which of course is true as far as it goes. But I think when we look at where we're actually at in the 5G evolution, we still have, more innovation coming onto the network. We have new capabilities, particularly for operators who have deployed standalone, to do more interesting things that they could actually monetize, that could draw from the performance at the edge. So my pep talk is that, we're only halfway through the game on 5G. And so now we have these new capabilities coming on in terms of the ability to offer dynamic network slices that could draw from, resources both at the edge and at, core and in the access, depending on what the use case is. We've got potentially new capabilities coming in with some of the work that Kamara is doing around telco APIs, where so far edge cloud has really not been a major factor, but there's plenty of reasons why you could envision a scenario in which if I'm an enterprise and I want to have drones out there for whatever it might be, video surveillance or mobile gaming, or pick your, if you're even the challenge even there gets complicated, because if you're thinking about video surveillance, is very different if I'm in a sort of a mine kind of situation versus if I'm just going out and doing routine maintenance on my facility, that kind of thing. There's different parameters there. So the opportunities have never been better to pull in edge as part of the value proposition for the telcos. The challenge that has always been a challenge for the telcos is, okay, great, there's all these opportunities. The business models that go with that is where telcos have historically struggled. And I would argue partly that's based on the limitations of the systems on which they're operating and monetizing. And we can talk about that in a few minutes. But right. I think the larger point is, you have to have these capabilities in place first and foremost in order to be able to articulate the use cases.
Yeah, right. You touch upon what I think is a key aspect of that conversation, system certainly, and we will get to that. But also, how do you open up edge for innovation from outside of telco. It could be, there has to be a standardized mechanism for interoperability or interacting with the capabilities of the devices you have at the edge. Kamara, certainly it's going some way, or Open Gateway. What are your thoughts on APIs in general, particularly from a telco network API standpoint? Is that a factor in holding back how quickly we have been able to embrace the opportunities that Edge is actually offering us?
Yeah, 100%. And it's not just around Kamara. Kamara has been very valuable to kind of force this conversation, but really it's about the fact that if you want to, kind of mesh with what enterprise priorities are, that this is really kind of an API economy. And certainly when you think about cloud resources, that's that's basically all about APIs. And then you talk about cloud native as a sort of a common denominator or a common platform on which everybody needs to be on, because otherwise, you've got multiple silos that aren't really well integrated. And that's the kind of orchestration that Bruno mentioned earlier. I think it's key to have some sort of a common lingua franca, when APIs kind of serve that purpose.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Bruno, about the importance of the API economy here, and how big a challenge is that, in your progress towards unlocking more opportunities at the edge?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that come to mind, and one is the support for legacy systems. So if we talk about edge deployments and relation to legacy systems, I think this is the issue that we face in Norway particularly. So I would put up to that support for cloud native principles in this kind of legacy systems is one of the main challenges that comes to monetization part. So if we narrow down on that, then I think that many operators will be able to get up of the OSS BSS legacy issues. So many have still working in hybrid mode, combining 5G, and we still don't have the standalone deployed worldwide. Just a couple of operators are going that way, but 2G and GSM are still going to be prevalent, and this is one of the main blockers that poses threat to more widespread adoption of edge related services.
Right. I think now we are actually getting into the meat of the matter here, the ability or the inability of legacy incumbent OSS BSS systems to actually accelerate adoption of edge, accelerate monetization of edge. So let's double click on that a little bit more, because there are different aspects of that. You made a reference to architecture, the absence of cloud native architecture as being a factor. So what exactly are the bottlenecks here? Are we talking about an issue with being able to monetize in time, or is it more of a challenge in actually being able to expose some of those capabilities to build that marketplace economy? Is it more about the cost becomes prohibitive given the legacy systems that we have, that it's not feasible to sometimes support some of the leading edge cases? Let's go down that a little bit more. Let's start with you, John. Share with us some of your thoughts. You've had the visibility, at Netcracker, working with a number of leading operators across the world. What are some of the thoughts you have around the challenges with regard to legacy systems at the edge?
Yeah, I think the answer is kind of all of the above, John, in that you can't deliver, you have the imperatives of orchestrating on the delivery side and delivering a network outcome that you can assign an API to in order to be able to monetize it. And that requires, multiple levels of orchestration that happen both at the domain level, which should encompass edge increasingly as part of the domains that we're looking at, but then from an overall service perspective, where you're orchestrating all of those domains into a end user outcome, which ideally is customized for that customer. The opportunity there in multiple B2B contexts is you know, it's impressive, but only if you can orchestrate the right resources, which requires you to have a, good insights on your inventory and your topology, because if you don't know where your domain, resources are, and you can't make sure they're all coming together at the right time, then you're not going to be able to monetize. And then you need to be able to actually have the visibility on those services as you deliver them to make sure you're delivering what you say you're going to deliver. And then ultimately, on the monetization side, you need to have, robust dynamic catalog that again encompasses edge resources within what you're delivering and, can offer up. We're seeing some operators now where they're kind of increasingly interested, not just in doing that for their own B2B use cases, but also to be able to offer these in a self-service capability that wholesalers, we see this particularly in a lot of the European operators, really keen to look to that wholesale channel as a revenue generator. You're not going to be able to do that unless you can, guarantee that you can spin up an ecosystem of partners and make sure revenue is, delivered to where it needs to be, and also that the catalog is robust and things change, and you need to be able to account for that in the catalog and that sort of thing. So, long-winded answer, but the answer is definitely all of the above.
Yeah. Bruno, just want to bring you back into this. To what extent is the presence of legacy and often disparate systems delaying your ability to monetize some of the leading edge cases? And we spoke about ROI earlier. How big a factor is legacy OSS BSS in delaying ROI, in terms of the overall go-to-market?
I wouldn't say that it's such a big factor in delaying the ROI, because you would have, let's say, services which are next generation that can be deployed on the edge. And I can give an example, like we have this use case with the military and the Norwegian defense. So this is completely disaggregated from the part that we work with legacy systems, as the military is working on next generation 5G and standalone. So we talk about non-public 5G, right? And if we have deployments which are, in the public domain, then this is something that you can't just switch to a new paradigm and a new architecture. And for something like this to be able to work, you need to have like fully fledged deployment that will be completely changed and upgraded, like from the root up. And this is something that is not easy to do, and I think many operators will agree. So in terms of edge services that you can do in this case is to focus on monetizing on new services and next generation applications that support, as you mentioned earlier, API exposure and more advanced use cases like we have with the military, for example.
Right. Let's just quickly check in on some of the use cases because I know that's something that's of interest. Bruno, I know you did mention you have some other projects that that's underway that involves edge. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the other use cases that you're experimenting with or you actually have gone live with?
Yes, some of the use cases that involve that is we have a center for edge experimentation in Svalbard, which is in the very north of Norway, and this is in the Arctic Circle, and involves testing of different edge capabilities related to 5G and applications close to the user. So providing 5G connectivity and low latency applications is something that is critical in that area, since the conditions of living are such, and this provides us, Telenor, to experience this directly in conditions like that. The other experience we have is with Volvo in Sweden, where we have deployed the bespoke model edge, and we are testing at the moment self-driving motorization and transportation. And Volvo is very interested to understand how edge can contribute in terms of 5G connectivity in vehicle or network slices to provide low latency communication and enable the V2X slice. So that's one of the two main cases that we have in Telenor RNI at the moment.
Right. John, do you want to add anything to that? Any other use cases that's interesting that you think is going to catch on in the near term?
Yeah, and I think that longer term, the area of opportunity that I think is the greatest is for, I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking as an industry about private 5G, but most of the time we're talking about private 5G in the form of a, literally a private network on private spectrum delivering for a manufacturing plant or some other campus setting. And that obviously has its place, and it's very important in those markets. I think the notion of a private slice on a public network that can deliver to exacting specifications, but that doesn't require a private network. To me, that's the biggest long-term opportunity for a lot of operators. We're seeing, opportunities from companies like Etisalat and really tapping that market in the United Arab Emirates. I think that one is one where, from a lot of operator perspective, if you can deliver those resources that encompass computing at the edge, and certainly now that we think about all the AI opportunity that might go with that, that to me is ultimately going to be a sweet spot for operators.
Yeah, yeah. I hear a fair number of examples around what can be called smart retail, where different types of firms use edge-based devices for different types of applications. It could be as simple as just recognizing number plates of every car or vehicles that comes and does a pickup. Maybe even try and link that to an automated system to deliver click and collect orders, for instance, and those kinds of examples. One other thing we didn't talk about much is about the impact of edge devices on the overall customer experience, as an enablement tool that will provide real-time feedback to, on the quality of experience and so on, so that we can have an autonomous cycle that will take real-time actions so that the end user experience is appropriate. Is that something that's of interest at this point, John?
Absolutely, that needs to be a part of this. We probably haven't talked about it enough in terms of the need to make sure that automation and the ability to monitor and deliver and guarantee without having a human sort of on the loop or in the loop, making sure that the human is in kind of a supervisory role, as opposed to where we're at in a lot of use cases still, where it's very much a dashboard type of environment, and where a network engineer is getting feedback and it's making his or her dashboards better, but not necessarily taking them out of the loop. So having that constant feedback loop in order to free them up to do higher value things and to do more. Realistically, you can't deliver all these use cases that you would like to be able to deliver and expect humans to kind of be in that, monitoring every single use case, right?
Right. Just one quick follow-up to that. How big a role is Gen AI playing at the edge? I'm aware that the fact that there are restrictions on the computational intensity at the edge, it is maybe perhaps for now a slow progress. But anything you want to add to that, John?
Certainly overall, Gen AI is kind of in an interesting place where we saw this year at MWC, I'm sure you saw it too, that Gen AI is morphing and aligning with agentic AI in a really interesting way, where there's a role for Gen AI to kind of, for example, in network operations and network monitoring, to be able to look at network performance and interpret it in a way that makes sense, that can spin out a number of agentic AIs that are very automated but are task oriented, that can come back to deliver a solution. So very much Gen AI and the Gen AI story, which a couple of years ago, was everybody feel like everybody needed to have something to say at Gen AI after, right after 2022. But the progress that we're seeing in real deployments of Gen AI, particularly, I think at Netcracker, we were probably early out in, articulating things. And then when agentic AI came along, I think it was more of a nomenclature thing to say, well, yes, we've been doing this for several years. We just, the language hasn't quite caught up to what, where the technology has been going. So yes, very much a role for Gen AI plus agentic.
Great. Thank you, John. So I think we are almost on the edge of the time here, no pun intended. But one last question for you, Bruno. what is the one thing, you made a reference to cloud native earlier, but what is the one thing that must change for telcos to expand or accelerate how quickly it unlocks the opportunities at the edge?
One of the main points that I would say is always data sovereignty and control of the data that the user can have when we work with edge. It means that the data is always on the premises of the user or the company, and the user has full control over the data. And that's a very big selling point in terms of security and confidentiality. So besides computational capabilities and everything we mentioned so far, this is something that people usually forget, but it's coming as one of the biggest selling points, in my opinion.
That's great. That's a wonderful way to end. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. That was a really great session. A lot of insights there. And thanks for everyone who joined. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.